At a 60-person family reunion, my own father raised a glass and told a room full of our relatives that I was the family's biggest disappointment. He called my sister everything he ever hoped for. 60 pairs of eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I let the toast end. Then I stood up and delivered a 90-second response that changed everything. This is what happens when a quiet truth gets a microphone. I was the reliable daughter, the one who never asked for much. For 30 years, I accepted that role. But when he said those words into a microphone, a lifetime of quiet compromises suddenly had a price tag. What do you say back when your own father hands you his deepest contempt as a party favor? To understand that moment, you have to understand the silence that built it. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of decisions. Every birthday, every holiday, every family photo was a lesson in comparative value. My sister, Clara, was the family's living emblem of potential. From the time we were little, her accomplishments were monuments. A decent grade on a math test warranted ice cream. A solo in the school choir meant flowers delivered to the stage. Her laughter was a command for attention, her tears a family-wide emergency requiring immediate soothing. I learned to navigate around that gravity. I was the easy one, the predictable one, the child you didn't have to worry about. They called it being mature. It felt like being invisible. The blueprint was drawn in small, daily ink. When I was 9, I spent a month building a diorama of the solar system for a science fair, painting tiny planets on beads, wiring them with careful orbits. My father glanced at it on the kitchen table the night before and said, "Looks like a lot of fuss for extra credit." The next afternoon, Clara brought home a participation ribbon from a soccer tournament where every player got one. That ribbon got a magnet on the fridge for a year. My solar system came home in a crumpled paper bag. No one asked to see it. The message wasn't shouted. It was breathed into the air of our house. One child's efforts were an investment. The others were a hobby. At high school, the ledger had clear columns. Clara's column was filled with new clothes for every dance, driving lessons the day she turned 16, a used but spotless convertible for her 17th birthday. My column contained hand-me-downs that were never quite in style, a bus pass, and the repeated mantra, "You're so resourceful, you'll figure it out." My parents weren't cruel people in the obvious sense. They provided food, shelter, the basics, but provision and celebration are different languages. They spoke fluently in one for her and in mumbled fragments for me. When I made the honor roll, it was a quiet nod. When Clara made the junior varsity squad, it was a celebratory dinner. The imbalance wasn't in what was given, but in what was witnessed, cheered for, deemed worthy of family pride. I found my escape in books and in a part-time job at the local library shelving returns. The silence there was different. It was peaceful, full of other worlds where being quiet was an advantage. I saved every penny from that job, hiding the cash in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. It was my proof, to myself, that I could build something they didn't oversee. That library was also where I met Liam, my first real friend who saw the imbalance without me having to explain it. He worked at the cafe next door and would bring me a stale pastry at the end of my shift. One day, after my parents had left a parent-teacher conference early to catch Clara's cheerleading practice, Liam slid a hot chocolate across the counter to me and said, "You know their chaos isn't a reflection of your worth, right?" I didn't know how to answer that. I just held the warm cup and let the sentence sit in a new part of my mind, a part that was starting to keep its own records. College was the first major fracture point. Clara, of course, was visiting picturesque campuses with my parents, discussing dorm styles and meal plans. My college search was conducted on the library's public computer, a spreadsheet of tuition costs versus scholarship opportunities. I got into a good state school with a partial academic scholarship. The gap, the several $1,000s a year for room, board, and books, was presented to me as my responsibility. "A little debt builds character," my father said, clapping me on the shoulder. That same week, they co-signed a lease for a luxury apartment near Clara's private university. The math was no longer subtle. It was an equation. Her potential was a family asset to be funded. My ambition was a personal liability to be managed. The summer before I left, the chasm became a physical space. Our house buzzed with preparation for Clara's send-off. There were shopping trips for decor, a going-away party with a catered taco bar, and endless discussions about her class schedule. My preparations were solitary, sorting my meager belongings, picking up extra shifts, studying the bus routes from campus to potential job sites. The night before we were both to leave, my mother came into my room. She held a new set of towels, still in the plastic. "I thought you could use these," she said, placing them on my bed. It was a kind gesture, but it felt like an afterthought, a last-minute purchase to quiet a conscience. She lingered in the doorway. "You'll call if you need anything?" she asked. It was the standard question. We both knew the unspoken rule, don't need anything. I arrived at campus with 2 suitcases and that HoloBook savings, which was already earmarked for textbooks. I shared a cramped triple dorm room, took the bus to my library job on campus, and learned to survive on dining hall cereal and instant noodles. My family group chat was a stream of photos. Clara's beautiful apartment, her new friends, my parents visiting her for brunch. My occasional text, "Midterms are going okay," would get a heart reaction, and then the conversation would pivot back to Clara's latest adventure. The distance didn't create clarity for them. It just made their focus more concentrated. I was off the spreadsheet. For 4 years, I built a parallel life. I graduated with honors and no fanfare. There was no family trip, no dinner, a mailed card with a generic congratulations signature. I took a job as a project coordinator at a small nonprofit in the city, found a studio apartment, and crafted a quiet, competent adulthood. I thought the geography and my self-sufficiency would be enough. I thought I could outrun the need for their approval by simply never asking for it. Which is why, when the reunion invitation came in the mail last spring, I hesitated for a full week. It was a milestone event. My grandparents' 50th anniversary and the entire extended family would be there. 60 people. A part of me, the quiet girl from the library, wanted to decline. But a newer, angrier part, the one that had built a life from scratch, wanted to be seen. To walk into that room as the woman I had become, not the daughter they remembered. It was a risk, a test. I bought a new dress, not for them, but for me. I rehearsed answers to polite questions about my life. I told myself I was ready. What I didn't rehearse was the toast. I didn't rehearse my father standing up, glass in hand, beaming at the crowd, his voice thick with nostalgia and cheap champagne. I didn't rehearse him speaking about family legacy, about pride, about the joy of seeing your hopes reflected in your children. And I certainly didn't rehearse the pivot, the way his eyes slid over to me, his smile turning wistful, almost pitying, as he said the words that made the room freeze. "And we love all our children, of course. But you can't help but look at Clara and see everything you ever hoped for, and well, sometimes you look at the other path and see the disappointment." He chuckled, as if sharing a bittersweet universal truth. The air left the room. All eyes locked on me. And in that suspended second, a lifetime of silent compromises reached its final, unbearable price. The room didn't gasp. That's the thing about profound cruelty. It often lands in a vacuum of sound. 60 people held their breath, their forks suspended, their smiles fossilized on their faces. The only movement was my father, lowering his glass with a satisfied nod, as if he just shared a charming anecdote, not a public execution. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide, but she said nothing. Clara looked down at her plate, a faint blush on her cheeks, but it wasn't shame for me. It was the discomfort of being the awkward centerpiece of a compliment gone horrifically wrong. And me? I felt a strange, icy calm. It was the same feeling I had when I balanced my final budget for college, when I signed the lease on my apartment alone. It was the clarity of having nothing left to lose. In that silence, a lifetime of data points snapped into a single glaring graph. The diorama ignored, the bus pass, the towel set in plastic. Every time I was told I was so independent. It was never a compliment, it was a waiver. A release of responsibility signed in my name before I could write. He hadn't misspoken in the heat of the moment. He had simply said the quiet part out loud and given it a microphone. My body moved before my mind could protest. I pushed my chair back. The screech of wood on stone patio was the first sound to break the spell. Every head swiveled back to me. I saw pity in my aunt's eyes, curiosity in my cousin's, outright glee in one uncle. My father's expression shifted from contentment to mild annoyance, as if I were interrupting the natural flow of events. I didn't walk to the front. I simply stood where I was at my assigned table at the edge of the festivities. I placed my palms flat on the linen tablecloth, feeling the texture to ground myself. I looked at my father not with tears, but with a focus I had once reserved for difficult client presentations. "Thank you for the toast, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying in the quiet. "It's illuminating." The word hung there, sharp and analytical. He blinked. He'd expected tears, a scene, a retreat. He'd prepared for hysterics, not observation. "It's funny," I continued, my gaze sweeping the room, making contact with clusters of family. "You talk about disappointment as if it's a destination I arrived at alone. But a child isn't a disappointment. A child is a responsibility. Disappointment is what you feel when an investment doesn't pay off." I saw my mother flinch. Clara stared at me, utterly confused. This wasn't in the script. The unfavored child was supposed to absorb the blow, not dissect it. "I've been doing the math since I was old enough to count," I said, and I saw my Aunt Meredith give me the smallest, firmest nod from across the yard. "And the numbers have never added up to anything but a choice. You had 2 daughters. You allocated your resources, your time, your praise, your financial support, your belief, almost entirely to one. You told the other one that her independence was a virtue to justify the lack of investment. That's not parenting. That's portfolio management. And tonight, you just announced the quarterly results to all your shareholders." A murmur rippled through the crowd. My father's face was turning a deep red. "That's enough," he said, his voice low and warning. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said calmly. "I'm clarifying the terms. For 60 years, this family has gathered and told stories. The stories of Clara's triumphs, of Dad's business savvy, of Mom's generosity. My story has always been the footnote. And she's fine. She's always fine. Well, let me tell you the story you've never bothered to listen to." I began to speak, not with raised voice, but with devastating specificity. I didn't talk about feelings. I talked about facts. The year Clara got the convertible for her 17th birthday, my budget for school clothes was $150. I bought 3 pairs of jeans and 5 shirts at the discount store. I kept the receipt in my diary. I still have it. I looked at a cousin who was now leaning forward, her drink forgotten. "The summer you all went to the lake house and I said I had to work. I was working 2 jobs, one to pay for my college books and one to save for a security deposit because I knew there would be no help coming. I cat-sat for the neighbors while they were at that same lake house with you." I turned back to my parents. "You have never once visited my apartment. You've never asked about my promotion last year. When I called to tell you I'd bought a couch after saving for 8 months, you asked if it was second-hand and then told me about the new sectional you bought for Clara's place." Each fact was a brick, laid precisely next to the last, building a wall of undeniable reality between their narrative and mine. The family was utterly still. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a forensic audit. "And the thing is," I said, my voice dropping slightly, inviting them in, "the greatest injury wasn't the stuff. It was the story you forced me to tell myself. That to be loved, I had to need nothing. That to be worthy of attention, I had to be in crisis. So I made myself small. I made myself quiet. I perfected the art of needing nothing from you, and you called that strength. You called that maturity, but it wasn't. It was survival. And it came at the cost of ever believing I was inherently worthy of the seat at the table you just so clearly pointed out I don't occupy." My mother was crying now, silent tears. My father looked furious, cornered. "We gave you everything," he finally burst out, his composure shattered. "A roof over your head, food, we sent you to college." "You gave me the baseline requirements of the law and called it generosity," I replied, and my tone was almost gentle, which made it worse. "You sent me to college with a map and a bill. You sent Clara with a convoy. Both are ways to get there. Only one is how you send someone you believe will actually make it." I let that sit. The contradiction was now visible to everyone. The uncle who'd looked gleeful now looked uncomfortable. Then I delivered the pivot, the piece I had never voiced, not even to myself. And for years, I thought the problem was me. That if I could just achieve enough, earn enough, be quiet enough and successful enough in the right, non-threatening way, you would finally see me. That this day would come and the toast would be about me. What I understand now in this exact moment is that you did see me. You saw me perfectly clearly. You saw I was the one who would tolerate the imbalance. You saw I was the one who wouldn't make a fuss. You saw me as the safe place to deposit all your disappointments because the other option, investing in me and potentially failing, was a risk you never wanted to take. Clara was the high-risk, high-reward stock. I was the savings bond. Predictable, negligible returns. And tonight, you just announced to the entire family that the bond isn't even worth its face value. The air was electric. No one moved. I had taken the hidden ledger of our family and projected it onto the wall for everyone to see. And then I did the thing that changed the axis of the entire conflict. I looked directly at my sister. "Clara," I said, her head snapped up, deer in headlights. "This was never your fault. You were a kid, too. You learned to accept the love that was offered in the only currency you knew. But I need you to hear this, and I need everyone here to hear this. The same system that elevated you also trapped you. It made your worth contingent on being the shining star. It made your mistakes family catastrophes. It made you afraid to ever be ordinary. I got ignored. You got surveilled. Neither of us got to just be a daughter." Clara's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time. It was a truth she'd felt but never named. The dynamic wasn't a gift to her and a curse to me. It was a prison for us both, with different floor plans. My father looked between us, utterly lost. His narrative of the proud father and the two predictable daughters was in ashes. I picked up my own glass of water. "So, to this family," I said, raising it. "To the stories we tell and the truths we hide. To the investments we make and the returns we never calculate. And to my own independence, not the one you gave me by absence, but the one I built for myself despite it. That is my final answer to your toast." I took a sip of water and sat down. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't frozen shock. It was a deep, ringing quiet, the kind that follows a bell that has been struck truth. It was broken by the sound of my Aunt Meredith, slowly, deliberately beginning to clap. One by one, from different corners of the yard, other hands joined in. Not everyone. Not my parents, not Clara, not my gleeful uncle. But a solid third of the family, the quiet observers, the ones who had sensed the imbalance but never spoken, applauded. It wasn't loud. It was respectful, acknowledging. My father stood up abruptly, his chair falling over behind him. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You have just torn this family apart," he seethed. "No," I said, standing again to meet his gaze fully. "I just stopped helping you hold together a version of it that was already broken. The tear happened a long time ago. You just never felt it because I was the one absorbing all the tension." I gathered my purse. "The party is for Grandma and Grandpa. I won't ruin it further by staying. My part in this particular family story is over." I turned and walked toward the house, not to the driveway where my car was, but to say goodbye to my grandparents. As I passed through the crowd, a hand reached out and caught mine. It was my cousin Sarah, the one I'd shared a room with on childhood visits. She squeezed my hand, her eyes full of tears, and mouthed, "Thank you." In that moment, I understood the real escalation wasn't my speech. It was what happened next. The unspoken alliances in the family were about to surface. The phone in my purse, silent now, would begin to ring within the hour. And the messages wouldn't be angry. They would be confessions. The first call came before I'd even pulled out of the driveway. My phone, face down on the passenger seat, buzzed with a vigor that felt alive. I let it go to voicemail, my hands steady on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the dark country road ahead. The quiet in the car was immense, a hollow ringing in my ears where the adrenaline had been. I felt no triumph, no relief, just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion, as if I'd just finished a marathon I didn't know I was running. The second call came as I merged onto the highway. Then a text pinged, and another. The digital world was now catching up to the physical bomb I detonated. I didn't look at them until I was safely inside my apartment, the door locked behind me, my heels kicked off on the mat. I poured a glass of water, sat at my small kitchen table, and faced the screen. Notifications bloomed like strange flowers. The first voicemail was from Aunt Meredith. Her voice was low, urgent. "Sweetheart, that was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. I have things I need to tell you. Call me when you're ready. And don't let them gaslight you." We all heard it. The second was from my cousin Sarah, the one who'd grabbed my hand. She was crying. "I'm so sorry. I've watched it my whole life and I never said anything. I was scared. Can we talk?" A text from another cousin, a guy I barely knew. "Damn, just damn, you okay?" But nestled among the supportive messages were others. A text from my mother, sent 30 minutes after I left. "Your father is devastated. How could you do this to him on his parents' anniversary? You need to come back and apologize." Another an hour later, call me, we need to manage this. The language was telling. Manage this, not talk about this or understand this. My outburst was a public relations crisis to be contained. There was nothing from my father, nothing from Clara. I called Meredith back first. She answered on the first ring. Are you safe? Are you home? She asked, bypassing hello. I'm home, I said. Good, she breathed. Listen to me. What you did was not an overreaction. It was a correction. For decades, your parents have presented this perfect family narrative, and the rest of us played along because it was easier than rocking the boat. But that boat has been leaking for everyone, honey, not just you. What do you mean? I asked, the exhaustion momentarily pushed aside by curiosity. You think you were the only one who got the independent speech, she said, a bitter laugh in her voice. When my husband died, your father told me I was so strong and would figure it out, while he offered your Uncle Ben a loan to start his business 6 months later. Strength, in this family, is just the word they use when they don't want to help. You numbing it tonight, it was a release valve for half the people there. She then told me something that reshaped my entire history. Your father, she said carefully, was the unfavored son. His brother, your Uncle David, was the golden child. Everything went to David. The attention, the praise, the implicit approval. Your grandfather was just as blunt as your father was tonight. The revelation landed like a physical blow. My father wasn't just playing favorites. He was reenacting a script written for him, casting me in the role he once lived. He had learned to cope by identifying with the aggressor, by becoming the parent who allocates love like a scarce resource, because that was the only version of parenting he'd ever known. The cruelty wasn't invented, it was inherited. The next morning, the battle lines solidified in the family group chat, which had been ominously quiet all night. My father broke the silence. He posted a lengthy, formal message. It expressed his deep sadness over the unfortunate misunderstanding at the reunion. He said my words were taken out of context and spoken in a moment of emotional fatigue. He invited the family to remember the joy of the occasion and to reach out to him privately if they had concerns. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. He wasn't apologizing. He was reframing. He was painting me as emotionally unstable and himself as the magnanimous victim. The responses were a fascinating study in family dynamics. A few older relatives posted heart emojis and well said, Dad's name. A handful of others, led by Meredith, posted simple question marks or the gif of a person slowly clapping. The majority said nothing at all. The silence was the real story. The family was in schism, and my father's attempt to regain control was failing because the evidence, 60 witnesses, was too fresh. Then my sister called. I stared at her name on the screen, my heart a complicated knot. I answered. She didn't say hello. They're tearing each other apart downstairs, she said, her voice thin and strained. Mom is sobbing. Dad is raging about loyalty and betrayal. He's saying you planned this to humiliate him. Clara, I started, but she cut me off. I heard what you said about the system, about it trapping me too. She took a shaky breath. Do you really believe that? Yes, I said without hesitation. Your mistakes were never just your mistakes. They were family scandals. Your achievements were never just yours. They were proof of their good parenting. That's a hell of a weight to carry. I got to be invisible. You never got to be anonymous. She was quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing. He bought me a Mercedes after your graduation, she whispered, as if confessing a crime. I know, I said. You knew. I saw it in the driveway when they picked me up from the bus stop. The memory was a cold stone in my stomach. Oh God, she breathed, and you never said anything. What was there to say? Thanks for the ride, nice car you bought for my sister. The evidence was the point, Clara. It wasn't a secret. It was a statement. She started to cry soft, hiccuping sobs. I feel like I've been living in a house of mirrors, and you just put a rock through the glass. I don't know which reflection is real anymore. All I know is that the person who got the car doesn't feel like the winner right now. That was the moment I truly understood the escalation. My speech hadn't just challenged my parents. It had collapsed the internal mythology for the favored child. Her entire identity, built on being the special one, was now revealed to be a construct that caused as much damage as my neglect. Her crisis was the "it gets worse" turn, the realization that the poison was in the well and everyone had been drinking from it. The following week, the fallout became material. I received a formal letter from my parents' lawyer. Not a lawsuit, nothing that dramatic, but a cold legalese document. It was a notice regarding the disposition of certain family assets. It stated that, in light of the recent rift and evident hostility, they were revising their estate plans. Attached was a copy of a previous will summary, showing equal shares between Clara and me, now marked REVOKED. A handwritten note from my father was paperclipped to it. It read, "You made it clear you want nothing from this family. We are simply honoring your wishes." The cruelty was so precise, so administrative. It wasn't a heated shout. It was a quiet, bureaucratic disownment. They were translating emotional hurt into financial consequence, the only language they believed had real power. But they miscalculated. Their attempt to punish me financially was the one move I was perfectly equipped to handle. I had built my life expecting nothing. An inheritance was a phantom, a story about a future that had never felt real. Losing it was just the confirmation of a truth I already lived. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't rage. I scanned the document, saved it to a folder labeled family, and went to work. Their attempt to escalate to a financial threat only demonstrated how little they understood the woman I had become. I wasn't the child who needed their money. I was the adult they needed to control, and they were fresh out of leverage. The real escalation came from an unexpected direction. My Uncle David, the former golden child my father had resented, called me. We'd never been close. He was a jovial, successful man who'd always seemed to float above the family dramas. His voice on the phone was grave, devoid of its usual bonhomie. "I got a call from your father," he said. "He's trying to rally the loyal family members. He's telling people you're unstable, that you're slandering the family, that you need to be managed." "Managed," I repeated, the word now taking on a darker hue. "He asked me to help convince you to retract your statements, to issue a public apology to the family in the group chat. He suggested that if you didn't, certain professional connections, he mentioned my network in your industry, might hear about your tendency to create hostile environments." A cold fury, clean and sharp, crystallized in my chest. He wasn't just cutting me out of the will. He was threatening my career, the one thing I'd built entirely on my own. He was moving from emotional punishment to active sabotage. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. Uncle David sighed, a sound of deep weariness. "I told him I remembered what it was like to be on the receiving end of our father's favoritism. I told him I remembered him crying in our room because he got hand-me-downs and I got new bikes. I told him that trying to destroy your daughter's career to save face is the act of a coward, not a patriarch. And then I hung up on him." The ground shifted again. The former golden child was now my ally, seeing the old pattern replay in a new generation. My father's attempt to isolate me was backfiring, revealing the hidden fractures in his own story. That night, I sat in my quiet apartment, the lawyer's letter on one side, my phone with Uncle David's call log on the other. The war had moved from a public skirmish over narrative to a private, multi-front conflict involving money, reputation, and legacy. They had thrown everything they had at me: emotional condemnation, financial disinheritance, and now professional threats. And with each escalation, they revealed more of their own machinery, and in doing so, pushed more of the family into my corner not out of pity, but out of their own recognition. But I knew this wasn't sustainable. I couldn't live in a state of permanent family warfare. The initial blast of truth had been necessary, but the cloud of fallout was toxic. I had to find a way through, not just out. I had to move from reaction to resolution. The question was no longer what they would do to me. The question was what I would choose to build from the wreckage they'd left at my feet. The path to peace, I realized, wouldn't be found in winning their approval or even in fighting them. It would be found in building something they could never touch. I started with a blank page. Not a letter, not a response, but a business plan. For years, my creativity had been channeled into surviving, then into building a career for someone else's firm. The idea had been simmering in the back of my mind, born from those late nights at Carter and West and the precise, clarifying anger of the reunion. I wanted to build a communications consultancy that specialized in helping individuals and small organizations find their authentic voice, especially those who'd been silenced, overlooked, or told their story didn't matter. I called it Clear Channel Communications. The irony was intentional. I was building my own channel on my own frequency. I didn't quit my job. I worked days at Carter and West, grateful for the stability, and nights and weekends building my own framework. Miles and Dana knew what had happened. The family drama had a way of leaking into small talk, and instead of seeing it as a distraction, Dana slid a client referral my way. This one's too small for our retainers, but perfect for someone starting out. Consider it a seed. It was a local women's shelter needing help with their annual fundraising campaign. That first client, that first project done under my own name, was more validating than any family approval could ever be. I was using the skill I'd honed, but the purpose was my own. 6 months after the reunion, the family war had settled into a cold, silent stalemate. My parents and I were in a state of non-communication. The will had been changed. The threats had been made. And then nothing. They had no more weapons that could reach me. My career was thriving. I'd been promoted at Carter and West, and Clear Channel had its first 5 retained clients. Their financial punishment presumed that money was a lever that could move me. But I had built my life without that lever. Taking it away was just removing a phantom limb. Clara was the wild card. We didn't speak for months. Then one Tuesday evening, she showed up at my apartment building. I saw her through the lobby glass, packing, looking nothing like the polished favorite child. I went down. She looked at me, her eyes raw. "I turned down the boutique money," she said without preamble. "I told them I didn't want it, not like that, not if the strings were attached to what happened to you." This was the surprising pivot. The favored child was beginning her own rebellion, not against me, but against the system that had favored her. We went for coffee. It was awkward, painful, and honest. She told me about the pressure she'd lived under, the constant performance, the fear that one misstep would make her love conditional. "I used to be jealous of you," she admitted, stirring her drink. "I thought you were free. I thought they left you alone because they trusted you. I didn't understand they just checked out." I told her about the loneliness, the invisibility, the feeling of being a ghost in my own home. We weren't reconciling some deep sisterly bond that had never existed. We were meeting for the first time as 2 adults who had been wounded by the same machine in different ways. We agreed to try, slowly, to build a new relationship as peers, not rivals. It was fragile, but it was real, and it existed entirely outside our parents' influence. The true closure came with my grandparents' anniversary, not the disastrous reunion, but the actual date 1 year later. My grandmother called me. Her voice was soft but firm. "Your grandfather and I would like to see you," she said. "Just us, lunch," I agreed, my heart in my throat. We met at a quiet restaurant. They held my hands across the table. "We are so sorry," my grandfather said, his eyes bright. "We saw the pattern. We called your father on it a few times, quietly. But we didn't want to cause trouble. We were cowards, and we let you down." Their apology wasn't excused by age or a desire for peace. It was a clean, direct acknowledgement of failure. They didn't ask me to forgive my parents. They didn't even ask me to forgive them. They simply stated the truth and their regret. In that moment, I received something I never thought I'd get: intergenerational accountability. It didn't fix the past, but it changed its weight. The story was no longer just mine to carry. They were acknowledging their chapter in it. With that, I felt the internal war truly end. The need for my parents to understand or apologize evaporated. I saw them with a detached clarity. They were broken people, passing on a broken script. My father, trapped in the role of the unfavored son who became a punishing father. My mother, an accomplice out of fear and a desire for a peaceful, superficial life. Their love was not a limitless resource. It was a transactional, scarce commodity they managed poorly. I could pity them, but I no longer needed anything from them. I made one final, deliberate move. I wrote a single, concise email to both of them. It was not emotional. It was procedural. I stated that I acknowledged the change in their estate plans and released any claim or expectation regarding it. I stated that I would not be initiating contact, but would be civil and respectful at any unavoidable family functions for the sake of the wider family. I defined the new terms: distance, civility, and a complete release of the old roles. I did not ask for a reply. I hit send, and then I archived it. It was my final act of independence. I was not rejecting them. I was simply closing their file in the active workspace of my life. The energy I had spent on that struggle, on yearning for their approval, on decoding their neglect, was now redirected. Clear Channel grew. I moved to a better apartment, one with a view that felt like a deep breath. I nurtured the friendships that had sustained me, my bond with my Aunt Meredith, the tentative new bridge with Clara. I even had my first healthy, adult romantic relationship with a man who had never heard of my family drama and liked me for my calm and my terrible puns. Then last month, the final surprising detail arrived. A padded envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a small, worn, leather-bound journal. A note from Aunt Meredith was clipped to the front. "Going through some old boxes at your grandparents'. This was in a trunk of your father's childhood things. I think you should have it." It was my father's diary from when he was 15. The entries were a chronicle of a lonely boy. Page after page of painstaking observations about his older brother's achievements, his father's dismissals, his mother's anxious pleas for him to just try harder. One entry, dated just before his 16th birthday, read, "Dad took David to look at new cars today. He told me my bike is fine and I should be grateful I have one. He said I was too sensitive, that I expected too much. Maybe he's right. Maybe wanting more is the disappointment." The handwriting was achingly familiar. He had written, almost verbatim, the philosophy that would later shape my childhood. He wasn't the author of the cruelty. He was the first copy. Holding that journal, I didn't feel vindication or rage. I felt a profound, devastating sadness for the boy he had been, and a fierce determination that the copying would stop with me. The cycle was now visible, end to end, and seeing it whole was the final key to letting it go. My life now is not defined by that reunion or by my family. It is informed by it. The experience didn't make me bitter. It made me precise. It taught me to recognize the cost of silence and the value of a voice used with clarity and conviction. I built a business on that principle. I built relationships on that honesty. The 90-second speech wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I stopped reading from their script and started writing my own. The family I was born into gave me a blueprint for what love shouldn't feel like. And in rejecting that, I made room to build a life where love, from friends, from chosen family, from a partner, and crucially from myself, is not a reward for performance or a consolation prize for needlessness. It is a given. It is the foundation, and no one can ever toast that away. So what does this story leave us with? Not a fairy tale, but a map. A map of how silence compounds, how a pattern of small neglects can build a wall tall enough to block out the sun for decades. It shows us that the deepest family wounds often aren't carved with a knife, but with 1,000 paper cuts of comparison, of withheld praise, of love delivered in unequal measures. And most importantly, it shows that the way out isn't through winning their approval, but through revoking their power to define your worth. If you see pieces of your own story here, if you've ever been the reliable one, the easy one, the one told to be grateful for crumbs while someone else got the feast, know this. Your quietness is not consent. Your resilience is not an invitation for further neglect. The moment you stop accepting their version of you is the moment you become free to write your own. It is terrifying. It will feel like betrayal, but it is the only path to an authentic life. Walking away from a dynamic like this isn't about anger, though anger is a valid fuel. It's about integrity. It's about refusing to live inside a story where you are the supporting character in someone else's triumph. You get to be the author. You get to choose the plot. And sometimes, the most powerful line in your new story is a simple, calm, devastating no. Our team here is dedicated to telling these stories, the messy, real human conflicts that shape us. Because when we share them, we break the isolation. We turn on a light in a room someone thought they had to sit in alone. If this resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it. Leave a comment below telling us what part hit home. Your story matters too. And if you want to join us for more journeys into the difficult, beautiful, complicated work of building a real life, hit that subscribe button. We'll be here, telling the stories that need air. Thank you for listening.